Still to come on Sky News. You're watching Sky News' Roy headlines this morning. The latest figures from NHS England show A&E departments are failing to hit their 4-hour waiting targets. Debating that shortly. If this is a crisis in the NHS, what might the solutions be? Are there any solutions? Joining us now, Dr. Mike Goldsworthy, who's an independent consultant and researcher in health innovation policy. And from Warwickshire, we have Dr. Youssef El-Gingihy, the author of How to Dismantle the NHS in 10 Easy Steps. Gentlemen, welcome both. Youssef, can I start with you? How much of a crisis are we talking about right now? I was just talking to Mike here when that report was running, saying, you know, in a sense, it's slightly odd. Today, we're leading off. Our main story is these A&E waiting list times. But actually, in a sense, the crisis there, the moment we stopped reaching that target, was back in the summer of 2015. Today's figures are bad, but, you know, arguably they've not got much worse than the last year. So why the sense of crisis?
Well, that's a good question. I think certainly in certain parts of the NHS and the country, if you speak to staff on the ground and from reports and leaks, there seem to be some hospitals which are clearly really not coping and really struggling. And that isn't surprising because what we've heard kind of constantly recycled is just a narrative of crisis, this mantra of crisis without any explanation of the root causes. The point, as I've repeated time and again, is that it's a manufactured crisis. It's due to deliberate government policies. The NHS will have endured nearly £40 billion in cuts by the end of this decade. That combined with the tens of billions being siphoned out of the NHS by the private sector means that it is really struggling to deliver care. And of course, some parts will be struggling less, but overall there seems to be a significant deterioration.
I mean, just to be clear, Youssef, I mean, the government would dispute elements of your characterisation of things like siphoning off to the private sector. We can debate that some other time, I'm sure. Mike Goldsworthy, Youssef is making the point that it's patchy in the sense that some trusts seem to be drowning. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, that was a point, actually, Jeremy Hunt made earlier this week. He said, but he attributed it to things like bad leadership, people not following best practice, not a shortage of cash.
Yes, well, it's always very easy to say, if you've got well over 100 trusts, oh, look, some are doing OK. And then you can point to them and let the others drop off. And what are you going to do? Let it get down to just one trust that's surviving and say, look, that's proof that it can be done? You know, there's clearly a problem throughout the whole system that comes down to lack of funding, because pretty much all of our trusts used to be in surplus a few years back, and in 2014 our NHS was ranked as the most efficient in the world by an American charity. And now we're seeing most of our trusts in debt. We're seeing demand rising, but actual investment in our NHS stagnating. And so that's why we do actually have crisis at a level that we haven't had before. And the moment to deal with this, I came on here before the autumn statement and said, Sarah Wollaston and others are demanding more money for the autumn statement because we can see this coming. Over this winter, the wheels will come off if we don't do something now. What happened with the autumn statement? They prioritised Brexit, getting match fit for Brexit, didn't mention anything on the NHS in the written statement. In the actual verbal statement that Philip Hammond gave, he mentioned the 10 billion figure, which has been disproved, and hurried on quickly. That was irresponsible. Now Theresa May has painted herself into a corner on this, and instead of listening to everybody, she's maintaining this line.
OK. From your opening remarks, gentlemen, people have established that neither of you are fans necessarily of the way this government's going about things. Youssef El-Gingihy, let's just reflect on what Simon Stevens said to the Health Select Committee yesterday. He drew some unflattering comparisons with the amount of funding that goes into other European health systems, talked about the Germans getting something like 30% more funding for their healthcare systems. But they are fundamentally different funding models, aren't they? So how well does that comparison work?
Well, the point is that those European models tend to be mixed models, if you're looking at, for example, Germany or France. But the point is that the NHS, in its original model, which is publicly provided universal healthcare system, that is actually the most cost-effective model. That model of socialised medicine is more cost effective than the European mixed models. So that's a key point. But I think the important thing to understand here is that funding, which everyone seems to be talking about, is all good and well, but it's a second order issue. Because as long as you have the NHS not in its original model, it has now become a market system with market forces, private sector involvement. If you look at all the, well, a lot of the literature, if you speak to health economists, public health academics, the point is that the more you bring in market forces in the private sector across international healthcare systems, we see the same story, which is escalating costs. It is more expensive and not cheaper. So this is the key point. The primary point is that we need to restore the NHS as a public system.
Mike Goldsworthy, Youssef makes the point that the most effective way to run a health system is by public spending, by taxation. Well, that's fine until you start having to tap the taxpayer for more cash.
Yes.
They don't want to do that.
Don't they? Because there are a lot of indicators that they actually do. There's quite a lot of indicators, you know, through polling and through just, you know, go and ask people out there, that they do value the NHS, they do realise that it's world leading in efficiency, and they do understand that in the 21st century, public models can be based on competitions between hospitals with open data, with no need to have all the gaming that private companies do. So people do understand that, and I was talking to the cabbie on the way here, and he was saying, yeah, well, we should keep it public, of course, because it is a cheaper model.
Was he volunteering to pay more tax, Mike?
I asked him that, and he said, yeah, I think that'd be fair. So people actually do think it's fair, and they do understand that as the burden on health increases, then we do have to pay more in order to take care of ourselves. But also, if we let the NHS become obsolete, it's going to cost us more in the future. We do have a brilliant system. Think of the NHS like a technology. Invest in the technology. Like, okay, this iPhone in my pocket, right?
I hope you've switched
Essie, yes, I have switched it off, right? I upgraded from the iPhone 4 because that was getting old and clunky. Now, that newer version wasn't made by cuts, it was made by investment. And the NHS is full of research and innovation, improving efficiencies and surgeries, inpatient care, in data. We need to invest in that so we stay on top of all of this, which is a perfectly easy thing to do.
Well done for finding the only cabbie in London who thinks that he wants to pay more tax to fund the health service rather than cutting foreign aid, which is...
well, he suggested that too, actually.
There you go, there you go. Youssef El-Gingihy, let's talk about A&E in particular. We've actually spent some time over the last couple of years broadcasting from places like the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham. We spent a few hours there. I was there. I was down at St Thomas's last year to see how things work there. And there seems to be a consensus about the problems with a want of social care, meaning that you get the bed blocking going on, problems with mental health. You know, some of these things are being addressed. Fascinating piece by Janice Turner writing The Times last week, talking about the problem with drink. I mean, you know, you're both clinicians, you'll know about this, you'll have seen this happen. A&E departments getting clogged up Friday, Saturday night with people who should be in a drunk tank, not getting priority treatment. Youssef, what do you say?
Well, so this is going back to what Jeremy Hunt, for example, was saying in his statement to the Commons, which is to divert blame onto anything but these deliberate policies coming from the government and from the corporate sector. And you divert the blame onto soft targets, easy targets, such as lifestyle choices, the concept of the NHS staff, aging populations, anything, if you like. When it comes to these individual lifestyle choices, again, this kind of talk is from Jeremy Hunt and others is ill-informed, because we know, again, if you speak to academics and so on, we know that health outcomes are actually generally directly correlated to your socioeconomic status. So the more affluent you are, generally speaking, the better your health is, the longer your life expectancy, the later you are likely to get disabled or ill. So when it comes to people's health, it's really not very evidence-based to start blaming individuals.
Okay, Youssef El-Gingihy and Mike Goldsworthy, doctors both, thanks very much indeed. Appreciate your time today. We didn't reflect the government's position there particularly, but the Prime Minister's spokesman has been active this morning talking about extra money going into the NHS. We've heard that before, the order of 10 billion, they say. We'll try and get a fuller read-up of what's been said by the PM spokesperson a little later on.